I hope everyone had a really good Easter weekend if you celebrate. It's a very important holiday for us. I dare say one of the most important of the year. It's the foundation of our faith. So I wasn't really available or recording. I just spent a lot of time with family and at church. It was a really good experience overall. But that's why we've kind of been uh, unavailable, not recording for the last couple of days, just kind of spending time with family and focusing on faith. But I did want to show you some things that are happening. The first thing before I step outside is these are the 6 zucchini squash that I harvested when we got back Sunday night, and one of them actually broke off the plant. But these are pretty good size, and I harvested some a little small so they get a little bigger, but this is really the ideal size right here. And these are the Cozell squash. But I have 2 other types of squash because I only have planted 3 types. That was the Cozell, I believe it's pronounced Zephyr. It's Zephyr, and then just a regular old hybrid yellow squash called the saffron squash, and it's really cool. It's kind of a crookneck squash, at least it looks like one to me. So I'm excited to show you that, but I'm most excited to step out to that garden again and show you the Zephyr squash because it is one of the coolest zucchini squash that I have seen, and it's actually one of the reasons that I selected those seeds, which I got from Johnny Seeds, and I'm pretty excited. I wish I would have bought more seeds because they ended up being way cooler than I expected. So you may be able to hear my dog going crazy barking. The neighbors are outside with their gardener who's fixing up their yard. So my dog's not having it. He's like, hey guys, y'all are too close to our house. He's really funny. And very protective of our children. So here we go. Here are just some of the berries. Look at the amount of production. And I actually got half a quart bag just yesterday put in our freezer. Doesn't include like the ones that the birds got because we have a mama mockingbird who's lived here for a while. So this one's actually pretty close to ripe. And these are massive, massive berries. I can't wait to see just how many these produce. And look at this grapevine. It literally shot up overnight. I cannot believe how just fast things grow this time of year, especially with all the rain that we've been having. Look at that, all those honeybees. So this morning I always come out to see my squash like every day or every other day and pollinate them when I'm available. And this morning I went to pollinate the squash and there was a honeybee inside of it and scared the bees, scared me. I did not get stung, but I was like, wow. And then I came over and there were a ton of honeybees within some of our squash plants. So honeybees are really helping, and so are the ants. Strangely enough, I keep finding ants pollinating. But look at this. Here's one that was pollinated today. This is one of the ones that had honeybees in it. And here's one that must, down here. This is just one plant. And that's the fruit where I broke off that fruit that I showed earlier by accident. So 2 of those fruit came from here. And look at this. It's a yellow squash variety. You see it's kind of bumpy. My brother grew some of this last year. And the skin gets really thick. So I'll probably only let it go for another day or so and harvest it. His got, by the time they reached about 8 inches long, which is not much longer than this, about this size, the skin was so tough that I had to, when I cut it up, I had to freeze it. I couldn't even peel the skin off. And so just to like make it smushy when it defrosts so I could use it. So that's something to watch out for. This type does get really rough, and you can see as it grows it's getting bumpy there. So this is the saffron summer squash. It's just a hybrid squash, it's nothing fancy. You can see it has a slight crook neck, which is interesting instead of just being perfectly straight like some zucchini. And then there are a bunch of other ones. This is one of the ones that I couldn't figure out if it was a crook neck or, not a crook neck, now I'm saying that because of the shape of it, but if it was a zephyr or the saffron squash. I really didn't know because when I was transplanting, there were still some spaces left over here. I didn't have enough squash to plant all the Cozell only bed. So one of the other type got transplanted and I was really confused. But look at the sheer size of these flowers. They're as big as my hand. Not that I have very big hands, but still impressive. And then you can see down here the squash developing. I mean, that's a lot of squash to come home and have 6 squash already. And the cool thing is that my husband's boss has a really amazing Mexican squash dish that he's sharing the recipe with us, and we also are sharing some squash with him. And he's so amazing because he also has shared, like, he's the one who gave us our little fig plant that we're growing over here, and that's this plant right here. So let me show you. Sorry if the camera's getting a little disoriented with me moving around and turning. So here's one of these. Isn't that so cool? I need to pull the grass away and mulch it in some, but we just have so much growing in such a small area. There's the squash and onions, and then the cucumbers. It all kind of grows together. And then this one must not get pollinated well because it's kind of shriveled up some, but that's not uncommon. And because it was raining so hard this weekend, Sunday it wasn't raining. It may have rained here, but we were not here. We were out of town. So there's some, but look at the amount of little baby squash on here. So you see why people, after a while, I think we have a plan for a lot of the squash. But if you're new to gardening and you don't realize how prolific squash is and you plant a whole bunch, I think that's why there's always that funny joke during spring and summer if you're at church about locking your doors because people will put zucchini in the front seat of your car. I can confirm that this is true. It used to happen to us all the time when we were growing up. It's so funny. But there's just so many, and that's why I tell people, you know, if you're new to growing squash, you might be amazed at how prolific it truly is and how much it produces once it really starts to get going. And look at this. It's a good example of how the Cozell squash is striped. It's so pretty. So you can see just the sheer size difference in this squash because this one, the flower has not opened. It has not been pollinated yet. And some of them are big enough to eat before they're even pollinated, you know? And then some are still fairly small. And this one's been pollinated today, but you can see what I mean. All those ants moving around in there. So you have both ants moving from flower to flower because they're collecting pollen to eat. And they're moving from the male to female flowers. And it's actually causing the flowers to get pollinated, but also the bees have been doing all of this work for us too. And there's actually one more squash plant I want to show you. Now I have like 4 or 5 more squash up by my apple tree in the front yard, but I am not walking all the way over there right now because I already took care of those this morning. But look at this. I didn't even pollinate these. This one just kind of pollinated, probably from all the bees. And then there's one down here that's pollinated with a flower. This had a bumblebee in it, not a bumblebee, a honeybee in it this morning. So I am sure it's pollinated. And so people ask how closely can I plant my squash. So the squash over here in this bed, I planted about 18 inches apart, which may not even have been enough. But the squash right here, I planted them very close together. They were not even a foot apart, or about a foot. And when they grew, they basically grew together. So these are 2 separate plants, but they're all the way in the walkway. And it has been really difficult to kind of look into here. So here's the center of one plant, and here's the center of the other. And the fruit grow really funny. They're way down there. And so sometimes it's hard to reach without worrying about damaging one plant or the other. So I think 18 inches would be my minimum recommendation. Now, this squash has this on top. It's not powdery mildew. It's just the coloring. If it was powdery mildew, you'd also find it on the bottom of the leaves, which I'm sure we will before too much longer. But a couple of our squash plants have this pattern on top. It's when it starts to get it on the leaves, and powdery mildew, when you wipe it, it will wipe off and it'll get on your hands. So you can see my hands are clean and this is not coming off. So there is a lot. This is a lot for 2 plants. They are very big and close together. So I will say, not spacing them quite far enough apart does make it a little more challenging as far as harvesting, unfortunately. And look at this lettuce. I swear, well, I wonder what kind of seed this is. It came from another plant. Look at that. I'm wondering, oh no, it's a wild blackberry. You gotta get out of there because they will just take over, and then they can transfer disease to our thornless blackberries, which we do not want. And also, we don't want them breeding with our thornless blackberries because, you know, if you have a thornless variety, why would you want to breed it to a smaller variety with thorns that's more of a bramble? It's just not worth it. It's a mess. So these are the lettuce. They're the Cimarron lettuce. And if you have this lettuce pack, you may have thought it said cinnamon, but it's mostly, you can see the coloring. These are gorgeous, and they were really tiny. All of a sudden, with all of that rain and the cooler temperatures, they just blew up. Now this is supposed to be a bolt resistant variety. Hey Shadow, what are you doing? Scratching his, he's scratching his claws, sharpening his nails on the thing. Of course he could be filing them. Cats are fun like that. But I prefer him out here on the garden doing that than in the furniture, and he's usually really good about it. Look at this insect. Look at that stinger. That's something I need to watch out for sure when I'm harvesting lettuce. That would have been bad to grab a hold of that, especially if one of the kids grabbed it. So I've never grown this before. At first it looked kind of like, it says it's a head lettuce. I haven't really looked up information on it. But also, I know it's an heirloom, but also some of these looks like they're actually forming heads. And the one over here, far away, over there, it almost looks like it's doing like a cause type lettuce head, which is basically what romaine, the hearts of romaine, that's kind of what that is, a cause variety. And those actually store really well and for longer, but the leaves are very thick, but they're very waxy and silky. So it's interesting. I've been debating, I really want to harvest this while the temperatures are still cool, but I've been debating if I should let the heads fully form before eating it, or if I should start peeling off all of these outer leaves and eating them, which is how I like to harvest them. I learned that from Charles Dowding, who harvests the outer leaves to extend his harvest, but the difference is over there the weather's more stable. Over here it gets extremely hot very, very fast. So this lettuce will not do well. It will start bolting by the end of May. So it may be a good idea to start harvesting the outer leaves. And if the plants do well, then do it that way. Or I can, if they don't do well, because some lettuce, they won't produce as many leaves, and they'll even get so stressed out that they start to bolt when it gets hot and the outer leaves are being pulled. So I may just need to harvest the whole head. It's a lot to consider, so I guess I'll let you guys know what I decide. But I actually want to harvest them tonight, so unfortunately I'm going to have to stop procrastinating and make a real decision soon. And then these are not squash plants. These are actually watermelons. I don't even remember what variety. My son wanted to plant watermelons in here because as these lettuce get ready to harvest, these watermelons will suddenly take off. So the lettuce will start bolting and they won't be able to harvest with the warm weather. And with that being said, the lettuce will also take off and they will just fill up this bed, and there's all the space on the outside where they can just go and grow and take over and not be in the way. So it's a great way. I really like melons and vining squash, pumpkin bread, all of that, because all of those types of things that vine off any type of melon, any type of vining squash, and pumpkin is a vining squash or a bush squash, so it depends on the variety. They can fill up this area and just grow in areas where I don't have beds and can't grow anything else, which is really cool. And also that means I'm not giving up my valuable garden space to these things that require a huge amount of space that I just don't have. So right over here, all of this are going to be various squash. Some are saffron squash and some are the zephyr squash. I really hope I'm pronouncing that right. Guys, if you know how that's pronounced, let me know. So here's one of those heavy hitter okra, and I'm really excited about that. And then here are a couple of squash planted together. Now the squash that are really close together, like two plants, it's because I did not up pot these like I did the bigger squash, because I guess I just got lazy, to be really honest. So I didn't think they would survive. I'm really amazed that they survived and they've actually grown and they're doing fairly well. So these may also end up being difficult to harvest as they grow, but the great thing is that I already have the okra growing in between them to give us a kind of a second crop once the squash get big enough. And because these okra are going to shoot up and be very tall, they occupy different spaces. So it's a cool way to get more harvest out of one bed, because you have the tall things and the things that are lower, closer to the ground, which is really nice. So that's an important tip if you're in an area where you have limited space, is occupy multiple spaces. And look, it looks like, I don't actually see the bug or the baby squash bug borer. It's a vine borer. So it looks like we have had a squash bug, because this vine is split open and you can see the kind of trailing it does where it chews and spits out the vine, which is very unfortunate. And because I don't see where it could be in here, what I'm going to do is actually go down under here where the topsoil is, and I'm gonna bury part of the squash plant. And so even though there's a squash vine borer in there, I know that I'm ultimately probably going to lose the squash, because I do not have any BT to inject in it. BT is a bacteria, and you can get a paste tube and inject it into your squash plants to kill those things. So that is an option, and it is considered an organic option, but I don't have any of that right now, and I've actually never personally used it. So what I do is I usually remove the squash vine borer, but because I don't see it in there and it's probably well under the soil and the squash is so small, I'm just going to bury the squash and hope that it produces more roots as it grows to kind of offset the damage of that vine borer. That's often what I will do. I would like to remove the borer beforehand, and I made a video about that a long time ago when I first started this channel. So I'll have to go find that video, because I think that's pretty helpful, honestly. I told you guys squash bugs get bad fast, and that's one reason we started early. But look at this. So this is a zephyr squash, and the baby squash, you can see the bottom's yellow and the top is green. Then there's another heavy hitter okra. And so this is really what you're going to get right here. A couple of these, when they first produce, are not really yellow, not really green. Some are yellow and some are green. So this is the first one that I hand pollinated, and there's just not, you can't really tell. It's just pretty much solid color, like a weird yellow green. But then this one I pollinated today, and you can clearly see the bottom's yellow and the top is green. Now this is still a fairly small squash plant, and these squash and the flowers are significantly smaller than my Cozell squash. So this is going to be a much smaller variety of squash. It's still a summer squash variety, but it's really cool. This is probably going to be one of my favorites just because of the color. Even if it doesn't produce as much, I think I'll grow this variety because it's such a cool summer squash variety. It's just really cool to see two distinct colors in banding just like this. And I think that's really fun and exciting. So I'm looking forward to that squash. I hope it tastes as good as it is cool, you know, because it would be unfortunate to have a disgusting tasting squash in my garden just because I like the pretty colors. But that is what it is, I guess. So hopefully it also tastes well. So these cucumbers, they look a little damaged, and there is some grass growing through quite a bit, actually. Even though I laid cardboard down, I think it's coming, like when we weeded it on this side, the seeds got in here. But I'm hoping these cucumbers start to take off now. It's been a little cooler and rainy, and I think that's why the leaves are looking a little sad. These are also the seed leaves, the first leaves that the plant produced. But now that they're producing, they have actual leaves and they can start photosynthesizing, I think that they'll start growing really fast, especially as the weather warms up. All of these cucumbers are the salt and pepper variety from Johnny Seeds, and I've never bought this variety before, but I liked it because it was a white cucumber and it's supposed to be fairly prolific. I did not see how big the plant was supposed to get, and my fence here is only, it's not quite 4 feet. It's between 3.5 and 4 feet. So if this is a crazy vining cucumber that's 8+ feet long, it's going to be a mess to grow in here. But if it's a compact variety, it will work out well. My original plan was to plant dark cucumbers, which is a compact variety, but I feel like this could produce better, and it was a cheap packet. It was less than $4 for a packet with somewhere, I can't remember. It was a lot of seeds. It was way more than 75. It's somewhere between 75 and 100 and something, but I can't remember. It was on sale, so I got it significantly cheaper, maybe half the price of what it could be. But I mean, I still have a good portion of that packet left, so it is an insane amount of seeds. And I know in a different video I actually put how many seeds it was, but honestly, as time goes on, I have a hard time remembering, you know, with everything going on in life and in the garden. And I'm hoping I'm not finding any more bees right now. Not that I don't love the bees, but I don't love being stung. And in here are all those watermelon radishes. None of them are ready, but this is another way that you can grow those cool season crops because they're hidden really well underneath these squash. And they'll get about 4 inches. But I've noticed that there hasn't been any cracking on the roots as they develop, and I solely think that's because, for one, this is mulched in really well with the mushroom compost, and the wood chips on top hold moisture, but also these giant squash leaves keep it from evaporating. And look, there is some yellowing of these, a couple of these plants. Probably the older leaves, but you can see the roots forming. And I could just come in here if I wanted to and eat all of these leaves. They're really good sauteed. And in my opinion, radishes, especially the leaves, when you cook them, either saute them or cook them in a stew, they actually get really sweet. So it's very different from what some of us are used to. So here, this is actually almost ripe. It's starting to get dull, which is what you want, because I found when they're a little shiny still, those blackberries, whew, they can get sour. And I'm more sensitive to sour taste than some people, so they may not be as sour to you. And you can see I still have a lot of turnips, but they're really starting to get attacked. So I need to just go ahead and pull everything out. Problem is that I haven't done my due diligence. That means that I don't have anything to put in the place of these plants because I didn't do what I needed to do. All I have is potatoes, which I could technically grow under the blackberries, but then I'll have to worry about digging out the tubers. I'm just not sure what to do. So maybe I would say I actually want to start some more squash plants, believe it or not. But I also have some hell melons. Those are a cantaloupe, Hill's Best, that I think I want to plant back here where these plants are and let them kind of trail into this walkway where I don't really do a whole lot back here. This blackberry plant's there, but I can harvest from the other side. It's just kind of the grapevine, and I think the grapevine is showing why I thought a living compost bin would be so good, because just over the weekend it's just taking off and covering this whole area, and it's really cool from the kids' play area and from the road, seeing like this amazing fence, which also, you know, it provides a barrier for my garden. It provides me an area to compost things or hold the logs for different things, whether I want to mulch them down or use them for the fire pit area. It is a really cool thing, so I definitely recommend it. I made a little video on how we did it. It was IBC containers, and we did it, I want to say, oh man, it was sometime last year, so it's been quite a while since we did it. Somewhere between 6 months to a year. I don't remember exactly, but since we're already in April, you know, it's been a little while. Yeah, what is that? It almost looks like a... I can't really tell the difference between Asian and lady beetles, and the difference may be that lady beetles have black heads and this one has a white head. So Asian beetles can cause some damage, but then I don't know as much as I should about insects, so I can just be ignorant to the fact of the different types of beetles and which ones benefits and don't, to just be perfectly honest. So if you know anything about the different beetles between lady beetles and Asian beetles and everything else, let me know how to tell the difference and if I should worry. Because that's really helpful. There are certain beetles I see, I'm like, oh, that's for sure a ladybug. You know, I know without a doubt that's a lady beetle, but sometimes I know a lot about plants, and the more that I grow, the more I need to learn about beneficial and non-beneficial insects, because, you know, it makes all of the difference, knowing as much as you do. I think that's why so many gardeners and farmers are so knowledgeable, because you just learn so much as you grow, the more you grow. And it really does make all the difference. Look at these carrots. You can see the tops right there. My sister-in-law asked me this weekend how you know when carrots are ready, and you can actually kind of dig down a little bit and see the tops, but it really depends just on the size that you like your carrots. Some of these will be smaller because they're close together, and when we pull those up, it allows the other carrots to get bigger, but we will occasionally feed carrots to the rabbits as a snack because they are high in sugar. But also the boys enjoy coming out here and eating them. And since we also eat the greens, they're just great. The boys or rabbits can have the bottoms, and then we can have the greens for soups and stews. Or I also like using it like cilantro and seasoning. You can see this one's actually really pushed up out of there, which really needs to come out. This is crooked and not very big. So here's another one. This has a good sized top, but something tells me it's not very big. These are all so close together. I probably need to come in and thin them out some. So this would be a good snack for the rabbits. And also we can eat, the whole carrot is edible. So really nothing gets wasted. The boys will eat it, the animals will eat it, they'll eat the tops, we'll eat the tops. It's a lot of good food and nutrition in the garden that I think many people don't even realize is there. I'm watching, and I can't really shoot the video because the direction the sun's in. It's kind of coming right towards my eyes, but there's a huge wasp working on pollinating our plants, which is really cool, because I think a lot of times we forget wasps, flies, even mosquitoes can be pollinators, which is crazy to think, but it's true. There are so many different types of pollinators. The lizards crawling in the garden, some frogs, they're just... It really is like a huge variety that we just don't think of all of the time, which I think is really cool. Oh, I was going to show you a little lady beetle that was there for sure, and it flew off right as I put the camera close to it. I guess I freaked it out a little bit. So, oh, wow, look at that. There's actually one on my hand. I guess I didn't freak it out too much. You know, my family always told me growing up, especially my grandparents, be kind to the lady beetles if they fly on you. Just let them go because it's a sign of good luck, which I always just thought was a really cool and really sweet sentiment, especially when you're a kid. So it's funny to see my kids running around saying, "Look, Mom, you know, the lady beetle's bringing me blessings or luck." It's really sweet. Okay, I feel like I could go on forever showing off the garden because there is a lot of growth in such a short period of time. It always amazes me the amount of growth you come back to whenever you're away for a little bit. And even these onions are getting massive. You can see just how thick they're getting at the bottom. So hopefully come June or July we'll have some bulbing onions. If not, there are plenty of green parts that we can use these like green onions or anything else. So I never worry when they don't bulb correctly because they can be used kind of like a scallion or a green onion, any of that. It doesn't matter. The whole onion's edible. So thank you guys for kind of hanging out with me and just watching me show off some of the garden, which I've shown off so much. I know a lot of you may be tired of how repetitive it is, but I like to show what's growing every week and sometimes several times a week because it changes so much so fast. And I think it really is mind-boggling, especially to new gardeners, to see the amount of growth and what to expect week by week. And look, all of these, this bed is completely full of lettuce now, whereas in just a week ago the lettuce plants were very tiny. So things happen so quickly, and I just enjoy showing that off. So I just want to thank you guys for always hanging out with me on my journey, and I'm learning so much from y'all, and I know a lot of you are learning from us as well, which is really cool.